Last up on the business track, how to talk to vendors, engaging and assessing their readiness. Konstantinos Karagiannis, Director of Quantum Computing Services Protiviti. Blair Canavan, Director, Alliances PKI and PQC Portfolio of Thales. And Kevin Hilscher, Director, Product Management at DigiCert.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Kevin Hilscher. I'm Senior Director of Product Management at DigiCert. Thanks for joining this session on how to talk to vendors about quantum preparedness. In the previous session, you learned about practical steps to begin your PQC migration, including performing a crypto discovery. And not surprisingly, as you begin your crypto discovery, you'll probably find that most of your third-party software, hardware is not quantum safe. Be it network storage, database software, CRM apps, SaaS apps, and others. And as a result, you'll need to start talking to your vendors about their PQC readiness. So to equip you to ask the right questions of your vendors, I'm joined by my friends Konstantinos from Protiviti and Blair from Thales, who will give us some of their expert insights on how you should be talking to your vendors about PQC readiness. Welcome, gentlemen. So Konstantinos, I'll open with you. Protiviti is on the forefront helping customers prepare for quantum computing. And as you consult with your enterprise customers, how important is it to begin talking to vendors now? And before you answer that, isn't this really just a vendor problem where enterprises simply need to wait for a patch or a software update, like waiting for a Windows update to fix like a security vulnerability or a bug? So is it really important to start talking now to vendors?
I wish it was that easy. I really do. I kind of envy companies that start at 3 years in the future, turnkey, that they just come into the world like they're born and they're fresh and they're new. Because for them, it is going to be something like that, right? Everything you buy will be PQC, essentially, and you'll start to put it all together and you'll set up practices around this idea of using PQC, and you'll be interacting with an environment, cloud, whatever, that is PQC. So that's a great place to be. But that's not how it goes for legacy companies, right? They have a ton of what we can call quantum technical debt, a bunch of things that need to be updated, end of life, removed, considerations that need to be made, entire practices that need to be altered for how things are done. So as a result, it becomes this sort of mess at first glance. Everyone basically fails any kind of assessment of how PQC ready you are, obviously. So as a result, you have to treat it a little differently. You can't just treat it like a patch. You can't just say that, oh, my major vendors will fix a few things and everything will just work, because it won't. How are you doing your coding, right? Are you part of the problem, essentially? Are you hard coding things in so your code base is going to be blown up one day? Do you know your crown jewels? Do you know how to migrate them? These are things that really need to be analyzed in an assessment. So it's not really that simple, but then it does become a matter of working with third parties.
Got it. And when you're working with your enterprise customers, what questions are you telling your customers that they should be asking of their vendors?
Yeah, we provide them with something that almost ends up feeling like a mini maturity assessment, if you think of it that way. And I'm not going to go through the entire maturity assessment right now, but the general, it comes down to like 4 major areas, really. So there's asking your third party what their focus on crypto agility is. What kind of PQC are they using already, which is probably nothing, and how fast they see themselves transitioning. And are they themselves guilty of some kind of like hard coding, rigid infrastructure that's going to prevent that easy migration? One of the second ideas here is to demand a roadmap. You can't just let them say, yeah, we're going to get there. We promise we're going to do PQC. No, you need something a little more mature and fleshed out that shows what their PQC transition strategy really is. Then you have to find out if they recognize the hybrid approach. For better or worse, a lot of companies are using hybrid in one form or another.
Right. So lots of technical questions on both sides. So it sounds like, you've already developed a maturity assessment with lots of questions that vendors, you can use to talk to vendors and your customers you're using today. Now, on the vendor side, Blair, I want to flip it over to you. Now, as Blair, you're with Thales. Thales has been known for, being at the forefront of cryptographic and security solutions. And so kind of as a vendor of PQC solutions, you're kind of like at ground zero in getting some of these questions. But before I ask you the types of questions, what are you doing at Thales to prepare your products and service for PQC so you can then answer probably the many, many questions that you're getting? So tell us what you're doing first at Thales.
Sure. Absolutely spot on and great question. I think the most important thing is to walk the walk. Often is the case that people will talk about the hypothetical or theoretical implications of post-quantum readiness and so on and so forth, and it's in the future, and we'll be there, and don't worry, we'll align with the stars. Really fundamentally, for the last several years, Thales and Protiviti and many of us have been involved in the precursor to the actual release of these algorithms. We were one of the co-authors of Falcon, as an example. So why does it matter to us? Well, because we're not only purveyors or solution providers with hardware security modules and high-speed encryptors and key management software and all that stuff. We're also the world's largest smart card manufacturer. We're a banking and payment system manufacturer. We put satellites in space. We have all sorts of different business lines that most people might not be familiar with, but you realize it's the entire fabric of the underpinning of all the cyber that we use. So we're consuming as much as we're building. So I think what we're expecting is to, you need to walk the walk. The simplest way to look at it is that we've embedded support for post-quantum in our HSMs already, in our Cipher Trust key management platform, which often is the case. You'll overlook things like managing keys or data encryption at rest technology. Well, we can't do that because all the asymmetric upfront operations or public key have to be secured using post-quantum. So we even had to rationalize with our own products what was the priority. So we've realized that getting involved early was essential. We've done so, and we're very happy to say that this is as late as last week, we released our 7.9 firmware for Luna, but more importantly, we announced alongside DigiCert and many others how you've already tested it and it isn't broken. Because I think that's the most important thing about this is it's not just one vendor, it's interoperability. And I'm a little biased because I'm in the alliances side of things, but Konstantinos and I and all of us understand that break fix is a big problem going forward. So the simplest presumption or assumption can really set you back. So instead of doing that, there's a lot of what we tell people to ask their vendors is, when can we test your stuff? Can we bring it into our lab? Can we work with you in some simulation? Can we talk to other customers that are doing things? So we're very open and inclusive and quite upfront that's important for organizations to consider.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned open, and by being open, you're probably openly answering questions that your customers, such as DigiCert, are asking of you. So what are typically those questions that you're getting? Give us a sample, and who is typically asking you these questions?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the simplest is, can I keep what I have, or do I have to buy all new stuff? And I jokingly say, I wish we built our products like iPhones, where every time a new camera comes along, we all rush to the Apple store to get one. It doesn't work that way in enterprise security. So the great news is that our products are upgradable in the field. And so they ask us, what does that mean? Well, we're talking about this simply as an upgrade to the firmware provides that capability to DigiCert and Thales and its customers. That's fantastic news. That's a checkbox, per se, for a lot of organizations that we're struggling with. How much gear is now legacy, or how much gear am I going to have to replace over time? Now, when I say that, there's also going to be the implication of, over time, performance in the industry. And I'm glad to say that with PKI and with things like code signing and so on, performance with these new algorithms is acceptable, and it is okay. Is it as good as RSA and ECC? No, but we had 20 years to optimize that. So as you'll see, as more and more products evolve and products, including ours, move into the next generation, we'll have purpose-built acceleration capabilities built into a lot of our platforms to make that problem basically transparent. And we all know that. That happens with whether you're Qualcomm or whether you're Apple or anybody on the planet. You've got to meet performance requirements, and that's just a natural evolution of things.
So, question for both of you. Let's imagine I'm a bank and I've got, an inventory of, let's say, 200 SaaS apps I'm using, everything from CRM SaaS apps to, billing and payment SaaS apps. How should enterprises be evaluating their vendors' responses to their PQC questions? What sort of answers should they look out for, red flags? And is there a bit of a trust but verify element to this? So both of you, jump in.
Well, one thing to watch out for is vague answers.
Right.
That's the most dangerous one. Anything non-committal, that's just scary. That's a red flag right there.
Right.
Yeah, anything vague. You want specifics. You want to know what they're implementing. If it's MLChem, great. What level? Is it 1, 3, or 5? Like you should be able to get very specific answers. And if not, why? Also, are they willing to give you something like a public-facing plan? There should be something like this available. Like what their PQC transition strategy is. There should be some public-facing version of it that they could share with you. It shouldn't be like a scramble or we hadn't thought about that. Let's make something up tomorrow. It should be something that they've already somewhat formalized. So those are some things to watch out for.
Question for both of you again. Is there any red flag answers that we should look out for when we're talking to our vendors? Is there, vagueness? I think you mentioned Konstantinos, vague answers. Is there anything else that we should all be looking out for in terms of red flags?
One big one is, are they following the practices that you're expected to follow soon? Like I mentioned earlier, when I go into a company, I say to, how are you doing your development? Are you modular so you could swap out this idea of agility, swap out ciphers, et cetera, in the future? They have to be able to answer that that's how they're working too. Because not only is it standards, but it's what customers you might want to work with in other countries or whatever, like you alluded to, other standards. You might need to have a complex environment in place where you communicate with one country using one cipher and another country using another one. So you need to know if these third-party providers can help you with this type of real-world implication.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. CI/CD pipeline management, software development lifecycle, the fact that we live in a global economy, the word flexibility is never more important. I think that everybody again, I'm thinking from our own engineering and development teams, this is a shift. This is also change management that, for example, those who would have picked an algorithm in the past because they were allowed to, we might abstract that a little bit. We might move it out to a policy. So as organizations are consuming, they're saying, should we have cryptographic policy management? And the answer is absolutely. I would bring in somebody like Konstantinos to say, am I doing this right? Or can I remain status quo? What changes do I need to make as I'm not only consuming products or solutions, but I'm also building? We all know our large financial organizations and governments and commercial operations, they're writing a lot of code still, and they're pulling a lot of open source. Are they going to continue doing it the exact same way and have embedded crypto without their knowledge? No, they're going to have to look at this now more myopically and consider maybe we need to do things just a little bit differently. So this is, again, a big shift in what conventional application development has done for years.
Awesome. Yeah. And you mentioned doing things differently. Is it too early to start putting requirements around PQC, MLDSA, MLChem, the need for TLS 1.3? Is it too early to start putting some of these requirements into RFPs and RFIs if you're an enterprise and you're looking for some new software or hardware to bring in?
I think it's the right time as long as you have some kind of timing component added, if that makes sense. Like you should say, you're using the NIST finalists by, 2028,
Ex-
whatever. Yeah, you put some, time boxing around that, so that way it's realistic. Yeah.
No, I think it's reasonable, but to Konstantinos and our discussion, it has to be time bound. There's no question you need to give some wiggle room, but you also need to determine and align with various standards like CNSA and other types of regulatory requirements for moving to post-quantum. Executive orders within the US government is a great indicator that you need to get this underway, and you need to make sure that your critical assets are discovered properly first, so that you have visibility into your organization and what it entails. And something like I've described many times to large customers is, how's your certificate lifecycle management looking? And they look at you sometimes, what do you mean? Well, you know that over the next few years, you're going to be shifting to a 47-day certificate. Oh, that's right. Well, you might need to automate that. And here's part of the process as you move to post-quantum safe is we're going to put that in the same bucket of, let's make those changes or start to make those changes now. So I think it's very reasonable to start asking and feathering that into RFIs and RFPs. And that will also suss out, the best solutions, the best vendors, and those taking a proactive approach.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a perfect storm coming up in the next few years. We have 47-day certificates, PQC. We have governments
Right.
applying regulation across and mandating it. CNSA 2.0. EU just put out aggressive timelines for PQC adoption in critical assets, right? So it's a lot of work in front of us. And what I'm hearing from both of you is, get started now, talk to vendors, align your roadmaps, start asking the hard questions, update RFPs, agility, automation is going to be key. So beyond those things, what's one key takeaway that you want viewers to come away with when talking to their vendors?
One takeaway for vendors and just for your own company is that I don't think we have till 2035. That's sort of been like the target date established by NIST for final disallow on vulnerable ciphers. If you take a look at the timelines of IonQ and some others, they're getting a little more aggressive. And if you look at just one approach, the Gidney approach from this year to using 1,400 logical qubits to crack RSA 2048. That's insane. We're going to have that by 2028, maybe, with IonQ. So,
right. I agree.
And in cryptography, when something's broken, it's broken. It doesn't matter if it's difficult to access the machines or if only one country will have it or whatever. Well, that's just, extra noise. When something's broken, it's broken. If you look back at the early days of the crypto wars and stuff, So I don't think we have till 2035. I think 2030 is a more realistic date. So it's time to start considering what hardware and software changes you need to make and start looking at that deadline.
I couldn't add. I'll try and add to that because I agree wholeheartedly. IonQ is a great example, and that race to quantum, whether it be Google or Microsoft or IBM or Quantinuum, this is an incredible effort underway. And then may I mention that we have various nation states working maybe 10x on this same problem. The race to quantum is real. That takeaway that I provide people is, do not procrastinate and do not underestimate humankind. I think we were all surprised by DeepSeek. Maybe some of us were smarter than most and knew it and saw it coming, but that's the sort of indicator that there are various methods of madness that when you apply that to the challenge that Konstantinos mentioned, the number of error-free qubits required to break RSA 2048, maybe put it in a perspective. What if it took a month to break it? What if it took 6 months to break it? I'd still take that as a nation state, as a nefarious actor, because that compared to conventional platforms, which, as I understand, have not been broken. So our classical compute platforms are still intact. RSA and ECC work. And if somebody wants to debate me on that or show me indicators that it's all been broken, I don't think so. I think this is a different paradigm completely that we're not ready for. So I just tell people, don't panic, But please be curious and do take the necessary steps to get informed. Bring in stakeholders, bring in subject matter experts that can provide you guidance. That's essential that you start that plan now.
Blair, Konstantinos, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us to share your insights on how to talk to vendors about quantum preparedness.